I want to focus on who is Tim Walz? Who is he? Why did Kamala pick him? And was it even a good idea for Kamala to pick him? And so we're going to hop into that right now. I'm going to switch over screens. We're going to hop into it. I want to read a few articles and look into some of the details of who Tim Walz is. We can talk a little bit about Kamala, talk about her odds, and talk about this race. And that's what this episode will be focused on. So I hope you can stay tuned. And I hope you learn something that is informational to you and to be able to help you with the decision you will make in November. So let's dive in. Now I want to look at an article here really quick, spend a little bit of time in this, and then we will move on and I'll show you guys just a little bit of clips about Tim Walz. And so we have a CNN article. Now, once again, CNN is not newsworthy, trustworthy by any stretch of the imagination, but this is kind of the image that they're going for. And so you saw in the beginning when Kamala Harris had the picks, right? She couldn't pick the Jew because obviously Josh Shapiro is a Jew, and you have the radical base, the radical wing of the Democratic Party, which adamantly is against, Israel, against the war in the Middle East and everything going on there. And so we look here and we have an article from CNN that says, a look at Walz's progressive policies as Minnesota's governor. Now it says, where the Biden administration struggled, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz succeeded. The former school teacher turned politician, whom Vice President Harris picked as her running mate in 2024 presidential race, has been able to enact many of the progressive policies President Joe Biden and Harris pitched, but failed to get through Congress. And so right here, right out the outset, right, we have this just admission that he's very, very liberal, very progressive. Okay, he is not. Don't let this fool you. This is not a moderation by Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris did not pick him to make her seem moderate. If she did, then she clearly doesn't understand what a moderate is, because this is not it. Tim Walz is not a moderate. So let's go through this, and I won't read all of them, but let's pick a few. Free college tuition. Last year, Walz signed a bill into law that made college tuition free for students from Minnesota families who earn less than $80,000 a year. Between 15 and 20,000 students are expected to benefit during the upcoming school year, the first year the program is in effect, known as the North Star Promise Scholarship. Now, Joe Biden, obviously, this is in reference to Joe Biden trying to forgive student loans, and Kamala Harris pushing this same narrative, which is obviously just economically disastrous. But then you have Walz going a step further and just giving it away, just giving college for free and making rural America, making the middle class pay for it through the taxes, making other people pay for someone else's education. That is a very moderate idea, isn't it? No, it is not very moderate. It's very socialist. And as a matter of fact, Tim Walz himself speaks about himself in terms of socialism, and he has certain ties there. And so let's take a look at this clip from Tim Walz. Here it is.
But we can get out there, reach out, make the case. And for one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. But we can get out there.
One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. Don't shy away from our progressive values, he says. Very clearly, not in any way, shape, or form pushing a moderate agenda. Tim Walz, do not be deceived, is not a moderate. Looking here, we have abortion access. Walz has been an advocate for abortion access. In January 2023, he signed into law the Protect Reproductive Options Act, which established the right for people in the state to obtain an abortion after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. Minnesota's policies around abortion make it among the most protective states for abortion access, according to the Guttmacher Institute, a research and policy organization that supports abortion rights. Now, keep in mind, there's no limitations in Minnesota. No limitations on abortion at all. No heartbeat bill, no 6-week, no cutoff. Very liberal and progressive. Next thing, gender-affirming care. In March 2023, Walz signed an executive order that directed Minnesota agencies to do whatever they could to protect and support Minnesotans seeking gender-affirming care. The next month, he signed trans refuge legislation that safeguarded access to such care, and another law that banned conversion therapy. Now, instead of a refuge state for immigrants, now it's a refuge state for trans people, for trans minorities. I'm sure if trans minorities want to seek the help they're getting, their parents don't approve, they can go to Minnesota where Tim Walz is welcoming them. And so on it goes. You have Tim Walz on illegal immigration. He's open to it. You have Tim Walz on illegal immigration trying to give illegal immigrants driver's licenses. So if Tim Walz is not a moderate, why did Kamala Harris pick him? Well, there's a few things. Kamala Harris couldn't pick Josh Shapiro because Josh Shapiro's a Jew. You have the radical wing of the party who is, for all intents and purposes, very anti-Semitic and is very anti-Zionist, anti-Israel. And so in the strangest of events, instead of moderating, right, because where the gold is right now in American politics is in the middle. In the middle, that is where the battle is for this 2024 election. And so she doubled down and picked a progressive governor from Minnesota who reflects her progressive values. Now, some have speculated this is because she's trying to appease the base. She's trying to have a Barack Obama type election where she rallies support from the coalitions and the minorities and gets them to rally behind her so that she can, basically have this very large coalition and minority turnout, which will push her over the edge like it did in 2012 for Barack Obama. Now, that's her belief, but is that reality? I find that very hard to believe that that's reality. And so I know the right, Donald Trump, many others, Ben Shapiro and others have spoken to this and are very excited about having Tim Walz as her vice president. And for all intents and purposes, it is a win for the right, because in doing this, right, for a while, there's going to be the honeymoon period, just like Kamala Harris is in the honeymoon period, where, the media will massage Tim Walz and to try and make him seem like, oh, just the moderate, just the, average Joe, the guy who likes to kick it and, football coach and cook up the barbecue and just have that rural appeal. But as time goes on, they're in the public eye, their colors will show. And it's already happening. We already see it unraveling with Tim Walz and things resurfacing that are just revealing his true colors. And so as we look at this, I want to pull up another clip and I'll show it to you guys right now, and then we'll talk about it as soon as I get back. All right, I'm back. Here is Tim Walz on... Here's Tim Walz on free speech.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
One more time.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
So there you have it. Free speech for me, but not for thee. Tim Walz is willing to commit himself to go against the First Amendment because he doesn't like what certain people have to say. He's very anti certain speeches. He certainly doesn't realize that that's exactly what the First Amendment is for. The First Amendment is not intended to protect the speech that you don't find as hate speech or the speech that certain people find as hate speech. And this is exactly very liberal, very progressive. And I'm pushing this point over and over and over again because I don't want you to be deceived by the media pushing this narrative that Tim Walz is moderate, that he's the rural guy. He's just your average Joe. I was recently, just scrolling through YouTube and looking at a video that was talking about Tim Walz in the comment section. Basically, it was a very liberal comment section, and they were all saying, "Oh yeah, he's just your average Joe. He's just a football coach, and he's just your high school teacher." Now, keep in mind that was a long time ago. This guy has been in politics since 2007. Okay, he has not been a high school teacher and a football coach for a long time. Okay, this is long gone. He is a politician now, and he is a very liberal, progressive politician. Now, moving on to another topic about Tim Walz. Tim Walz was also presiding over Minnesota during the BLM riots. Now, many of you may recall that that time was very, very dangerous. A lot of things going on, a lot of groups gathering and torching cities, and Minnesota was the center of it all. And so, looking at Tim Walz's record in that, we can see here that Tim Walz himself even called his response to the BLM riots an abject failure. Tim Walz, during that time, refused to call the National Guard out. If many of you may recall, there was the Minnesota Precinct police station that was torched by BLM rioters, and he refused to send the National Guard to come out and to protect it. He let it fall to the ground. He said, let it go, let it burn. And so that is where Tim Walz stands on these things. That's where Tim Walz is. He's very progressive, very liberal. And during that time, he was on the side, as well as Kamala Harris, he was on the side of the BLM rioters who were just violent and torching down everything. And I can guarantee you, during January 6th, he was throwing his hands up in the air and saying this is, democracy's on the line and such nonsense as that. But when it comes down to it, Tim Walz and Kamala Harris both have the same values in mind. They are both pushing forward a very radical, a very progressive agenda. And so it is the job of Donald Trump, it is the job of us as Republicans to point it out. It is our job to notice and to make it very clear who these people are. Kamala Harris, very radical, very left-wing, more radical and left-wing than Joe Biden himself. And she brought on to her ticket Tim Walz, who is just as radical as her. So as we approach the election, as we approach everything happening, we need to keep in mind what we're looking at here. Okay, you have a choice. It is a two-person race now. It has come down to that. We have our options. We have the radical Minnesota Californication image of what they want America to be. And there's no doubt what Tim Walz and Kamala Harris will roll out. Okay, they may put on a persona of being moderate, and they may do that to get elected. But at the end of the day, we know what their values look like. We know what their policies look like. We can see it in Tim Walz. We can see it in Harris. Abortion access, trans in the kids, illegal immigration, being soft on the border, horrible foreign policy when it comes to the Middle East and Israel. All these things are culminating in this VP pick, and Kamala Harris has made it very clear which direction she wants to take the country with this. Even if she did pick a moderate, I mean, right, we could all tell that this was the direction she was heading. But with the pick of Tim Walz, it has become even more clear the direction that she is heading.